Mic check 1, 2. Mic check 1, 2.
What are you doing?
A video in the car.
Viva Frei, Montreal litigator turned YouTuber, and this is going to be something of a different style, a different pace of vlog. I'm in a car right now in a parking lot in a park because one of my daughters is having a friend's birthday party in the park. It's an outdoor birthday party on a skating rink. You know what the problem is? What's the problem?
It's freezing.
It's freezing. So I'm in the car with my other kid who's playing on a phone. I'm going to walk through this lawsuit coming out of Quebec. It's a lawsuit that was sent to me a few weeks ago. I said I was going to cover it. In the meantime, I covered the easier one, which was a shorter lawsuit. This is a 30-some-odd page lawsuit. It's very detailed. It's a good lawsuit. So I'm going to walk through it. I'm going to maybe flash up the French versions of the lawsuit that I'm reading from as I go through it, but just explaining the nature of this lawsuit. The lawsuit is seeking the nullity of certain decrees, certain, call them regulations or orders that have been issued by the government over the last year now. 10 months. It's been as of March of 10 months. So they're seeking the nullity of these orders which have restricted our civil rights and liberties, as we say in French, pas à peu près, like a lot. And it's also seeking a declaratory judgment. I'm reading from my computer as we do this. A declaratory judgment to declare the orders unconstitutional. There are a number of plaintiffs, but the principal plaintiff is called Entrepreneur en Action du Québec, which is a moral person, a not-for-profit legal entity that is grouping a bunch of plaintiffs for the purposes of this lawsuit. Let me just see what it says here. It is regrouper et défendre des petites et moyennes entreprises travailleurs autonomes et les citoyens en général face aux mesures de confinement et d'hygiène excessif du gouvernement. It is a not-for-profit that is regrouping small businesses, individuals, to fight the repressive government measures that have been imposed. And then we get a bunch of plaintiffs who we don't need to go over because they are individual plaintiffs, but the lawsuit is showing that these individual plaintiffs, some of whom have 7 kids, are hardworking people who are seeing their lives and livelihoods not just disrupted, but utterly destroyed by these measures which they are alleging are unconstitutional, overly broad, excessive, and have no actual correlation to the objectives being sought. All right, we start by covering the ministerial decrees that have been issued by the government. Now, this lawsuit actually is very similar to the lawsuit that we covered coming out of Michigan, which was Governor Whitmer's orders, which basically were never-ending orders in virtue of the Health Emergencies Act, or I forget what it was, the Emergency Measures Act. And in that lawsuit, the idea was that you could have these emergency measures for 30 days, but you couldn't just keep renewing them without actually going through the legislative branch to legislate these laws, to have a debate, to have them be passed through the appropriate means, as opposed to just decreed by the government, which is now acting as, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know the word that I'm looking for. It's like royal decrees, basically, that we are being subject to the whims of people who are acting like the king of our nations. So that was the case in the Michigan lawsuit. It's very similar in the Quebec lawsuit, that we have a law. Let me just get to the name of the law.
A law?
It's a law. All right, so it is Article 118 of La Loi sur la santé publique, the law of public health. And basically, under that law, it allows the government to declare health emergencies and to issue decrees or orders for 10 days, but apparently not exceeding 30 days. Ordinarily, the law has to go get approved in the ordinary legislative manner through the legislative branch of government. There has to be public debates. It has to be a policy decision that is enacted after a public debate by our democratically elected officials, and not just imposed on us like royalty imposing on the serfs the rule of the kingdom. So the lawsuit alleges it was back in March that the Conseil des ministres de gouvernement du Québec, that the Quebec government adopted certain decrees. They called it concernant une déclaration d'urgence sanitaire conformément à l'article 118 de la loi sur la santé publique. So they declared basically a state of emergency, and they started issuing these decrees, which were supposed to be good for 10 days, renewable for up to 30 days, but no more than 30 days. We are now 10 months, going on 11 months, going on 1 year into this. Not only have the decrees been renewed without any legislative process over and over again, they have been getting more and more excessive and, according to the lawsuit, more and more utterly detached from any reasonable purpose that they could hope to achieve. The lawsuit then goes on to allege that the government made a list of what they called essential and non-essential services, and within the essential services, obviously the government included the SAQ, which is the Société d'Alcool de Québec, our liquor stores, our marijuana dispensaries. Basically, the plaintiffs are highlighting the fact that the government has declared drugs to be essential items, and I don't mean like medical drugs, I mean recreational drugs to be essential items, while literally shutting other people's businesses down that they deem to be non-essential. And I think it goes without saying that I don't think there's been any government official who has missed one paycheck since this state of emergency has been declared, because as we all know, government is apparently totally essential. The lawsuit then goes on to allege that the activities that the government deemed to be essential versus non-essential activities were absolutely arbitrary. There's no rhyme or reason. The government was almost like throwing darts while obviously protecting its own interests in what it declared to be essential services and essential activities. The lawsuit goes on to explain why these decrees were illegal, and just translating it quickly, it says l'état d'urgence sanitaire déclaré par le gouvernement vaut pour une période maximale de 10 jours. So basically, the sanitary emergency that the government can declare can last for a maximum period of 10 days, after which it can be renewed for additional periods of 10 days or with the permission of the National Assembly for periods of 30 days. And the lawsuit goes on to explain that the intention of the legislator was obviously to limit these measures to a maximum of 30 days. The lawsuit also alleges some absolutely contradictory information coming out of our own government, that the Ministry of Health in February 2020 produced a video where our own health director, Dr. Horacio Arruda, apparently, what did he say? He said, yes, that masks were not useful for the general population. This is in February 2020. Then the lawsuit says that in June 2020, Dr. Arruda, Horacio Arruda, our health director, says that when we have the second wave, because they were already predicting the second wave right from the first wave as early as June, and if not earlier than June 2020, they were predicting the second wave, which brings me to a lot of things I've been talking about in my Viva on the Streets. We have been predicting a second wave for nearly 6 months now. What has the government done to prepare for the second wave? I don't know, but they found $13 million a month to spend on COVID awareness advertising. Okay, I digress. Dr. Arruda was talking about the second wave, and he said, and I'm reading from the lawsuit, we are going to need more targeted measures because we know the virus a little better and how it targets vulnerable people who need special protection. Then in October 2020, the government announces un défi, which is a challenge. They want to go 28 days with limited contact with other people. And if it couldn't get any more absurd in terms of a government response, the lawsuit then talks about how in November 2020, the government imposed a social contract where we could have certain gatherings under certain restrictions, and then the government unilaterally withdrew that social contract and forbade people from celebrating Christmas with their family. And for those of you who have been following my channel for long enough, you know from my Viva on the Streets that the government then shut down non-essential businesses for 30 days to be extended indefinitely, as has been the case with all of the other prior measures. But they shut down non-essential businesses. They allowed certain businesses, essential businesses, to remain open, but they couldn't sell non-essential items, which has resulted in absurdities that would make you think we are living in idiocracy land. Just by way of one example, in stores that are allowed to remain open, the essential stores that are allowed to remain open, they blocked off items that were deemed to be non-essential. I was in a pharmacy and a disheveled homeless person came in looking for a pair of socks, and the cashier at the register of the pharmacy said we are not allowed selling socks because they were deemed to be a non-essential item by the government. All right, that's not in the lawsuit. That was my own personal experience. Getting back to the lawsuit. The lawsuit then talks about how school was postponed and kids returning to school after the Christmas break was postponed another week. Then it gets into what the lawsuit deems to be the actual risks of coronavirus or COVID-19. Just covering my tushy for the YouTube overlords. This is not my personal opinion. I am not expressing an opinion. I am just translating paragraph 67 of this lawsuit. That the presence of comorbidities or other serious illness are central elements in deaths related to COVID-19. And that certain studies showed that the average age of someone who died from COVID-19 was 85 years old, and that over 97% of those who died had a comorbidity and 88% had at least 2 comorbidities. And this is according to Exhibit P39, which is one of plaintiffs' exhibits in support of their lawsuit. At paragraph 76, the plaintiffs quote yet again from our Dr. Horacio Arruda, who said the following. I may add something. It's well known that when you want to compare death rates between countries, in between provinces, even if we have systems of detecting it, you know the definition of cases. Some doctors will associate the disease first, as in Quebec. Anytime somebody, even if they die from cancer or another disease, if they've got COVID-19, there's going to be count as COVID-19. That's not necessarily the case everywhere. everywhere, and even if I give that orientation in Quebec compared to Ontario, in the field, things can be different. And the health director apparently added the following: the only very good way to compare is to look at surmortality in a specific period. And that's true for France, that's true for, and the systems are not the same sensibility, even if you got the case definition. In fact, the sensibility or specificity can be very different for one place. And to be able to compare, because we cannot make sure that those differences are what they are, we are looking for surmortality. The lawsuit then goes on to allege how children are not at risk for the disease, and they say at paragraphs 88 and following that the authorities have reminded us on multiple occasions that children are not at risk. At paragraph 122, the plaintiffs allege that the measures taken by the government, taken together, collectively or individually, are absolutely unconstitutional and that they infringe on charter rights and that they cannot be justified in a free and democratic society. In Quebec, we have this thing called the Quebec Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms, and it applies to the government, and the rights and freedoms guaranteed by that charter cannot be infringed except as otherwise justified in a free and democratic society. And the plaintiffs here are saying that there is no way in a free and democratic society that the measures imposed by the government can possibly be justified, and therefore they are unconstitutional. The plaintiffs allege that the government is not only infringing on their rights as guaranteed by the Quebec Charter of Human Rights, but also their rights as guaranteed by the Canadian Charter, Articles 1 and 7 respectively, and that this infringement cannot be justified. Plaintiffs allege that their right of peaceable assembly has been violated, freedom of religion, the freedom to peaceably enjoy their own property. The plaintiffs allege that there's absolutely no proportionality of these measures that have been imposed, and there is no minimal infringement, which is what is required in order for an infringement to be constitutionally justified, in that the infringement has to be as minimally invasive as possible if it is going to deprive you of a fundamental right in order to be justified under the Constitution. And then we get to the conclusions, which I'll just translate briefly, but basically they want to declare the orders unconstitutional and declare certain provisions of law unconstitutional that allowed the government to do this in the first place. Declare that the government cannot infinitely renew these decrees of 10 days under Section 119 of the Law on the Public Health, or subsidiarily declare Article 119 of the Law on the Public Health to be unconstitutional itself. And then the plaintiffs want to have declared unconstitutional a slew of measures the government has imposed, including basically shutting down of all businesses. All right, that is as much of an overview of this lawsuit as we need. That is the essence of it. It is very similar to the lawsuit coming out of Michigan. It's similar to a bunch of other lawsuits. The only question is whether or not we are going to find a judge in Quebec that is going to be our Judge Stickman. And with the setting sun, I now recall that I have to go pick up my daughter on the skating rink. I don't know if anyone is still out there. All right, with that said, if you like my videos, you like my content, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, yada yada, all that jazz. More important than everything, take care of yourselves, check in on friends and family, make sure everyone around you is doing well, and now you know your vlog. Peace out.